Thank you for tuning in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community. The only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You're listening to Total Woman, and I'm your host, yours truly, Pink Warrior. I know it's still early. It's really not lunchtime yet for some of you. So if you're at work, grab your headsets so you're able to listen to what we have planned for you today. Get your favorite drink, whether it be green tea, alkaline water, your favorite juice or smoothie. Sit back and relax and enjoy what we have for you today. Now, I am really excited about today. Today's show, I have a very, very special person here with us today. He is the author of Fashion and Fatherhood. He is very, very special to me because I've known him since he was a little boy, and he's like one of my sons. He is the wife of Cashmere Coleman and has the cutest little daughter, baby Peyton Baroness. And he's known by Ryan Jor. So I'm going to turn this mic over to Ryan. I am so excited to have you here today, Ryan. Speak to the people. Let them know what's going on in your life right now. Tell them who you are.
Who I am. Well, first, listen, I don't know if she knows the interview is not going to go how she planned it. She might shed a tear or two. Before I say anything, I just need you all to understand who this woman sitting next to me is. She literally was the mother of all mothers and still is. And she's known me for 20 plus years. And Miss Gregory is always going to be Miss Gregory to me.
Stop it. We got to get this interview done.
and I haven't seen her in a while. And I just moved back to Charlotte recently. But the woman that she is and the man that I am today, I can trace certain things back to conversations I had with her in her car driving to church, or just sharing my thoughts and my visions with her. So I am Ryan Jor, the fashion connoisseur, and I am a wardrobe consultant and personal shopper here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been in fashion and retail for 15 years. So since I was 19, I've kind of known that this is my path. And although I traveled many different places in the work field, I always came back to fashion and retail. So I have a lovely daughter, Peyton Baroness, and a beautiful wife, Cashmere Coleman, and they are the reason for it all. So I'm just very excited to be here, and I thank Miss Gregory for having me.
Ryan, tell us a little bit about your book, Fashion and Fatherhood. Where did you get that title?
So for me, I hear God. That's just how it works. And so the title dropped in my spirit about 2 years ago, and so I started writing. And in the writing process, I wrote about 27 pages to be exact. And as I was writing, after I finished the 27 pages, I started kind of writing from my childhood that I can remember. And once I gave it to my editor, she scrapped the entire project. And, being someone who was not a writer, yes, I've written blogs and written magazine articles and things of that nature, but I never wrote a book. And so to have a professional tell me what I have is not good enough, it kind of hurts a little bit. But what happened after that really changed the trajectory of the book. And we had a 3.5-hour conversation, which she calls a brain dump. And she asked me some questions. And after that phone call, we had to figure out what was the problem we wanted to solve. Like, what is the book going to be about? And so now Fashion and Fatherhood, even though I am a father and I'm a male, it does have applicable tips for everyone. So at the end of each chapter, there's 3 fashion tips and 3 fatherhood tips that you can apply to life. And so the priority and balance, the work-life balance for someone like me who was, traveling climbing the ladder. It wasn't the corporate ladder, but it was more of the fashion retail ladder, and working 10, 12-hour days and coming home and being exhausted, and sometimes tending to my baby and not tending to my wife. And that alone we can talk about is backwards. And so I speak to that in the book. The very first chapter, I talk about how I got it wrong as it related to my wife and how she was looking at me kind of crazy. But I also talk about how I got it right. And so I give tips to those people that may be dealing with that work-life balance.
You know, Ryan, I'm looking at your book on page 52. It give us some fashion tips. I love the one where you say your wife needs to know she's beautiful, even in maternity clothes. Let's talk about that.
So, as I said, we have a beautiful daughter. And at the time, my wife was not, she didn't feel like herself. And I'm sure a lot of women can relate. This is a women's podcast. So I'm sure you can relate if you've had a child that your body changes, right? They call it baby brain. So you forget things. You can't fit clothing. You may be a couple sizes bigger than you were, so you don't necessarily feel beautiful. Me being a fashion person, very important for me to let my wife know, and being a husband, that no matter what she was wearing, she was still beautiful. And so the tip talks about if your task or my task is to find her clothes to make her feel beautiful, or get somebody to make them. So it's all about improvising. So whatever the challenge is with the wife's pregnancy or whatever she's dealing with, you as a husband or you as a significant other need to make sure you're doing those things to make sure she still feels loved and still feels beautiful no matter what.
You know, Ryan, because I know you personally and I follow you on Facebook, you recently went through some things with your father. Tell us about what happened with that, meeting your father.
So, okay. I come from a single family home. So my mother raised my brother and I had two memories of my father previously. And actually, I didn't call him my father. I called him my seed donor. So that's how bad it was. One memory with him was he gave me $10 to go to the mall. And the next memory was when I saw him, he didn't know who I was. And so over the years, I had daddy issues, right? So we all know about daddy issues. Well, some people it affects differently. So for me, my goal was to always be not like my father. So my ambition, my drive, my success, even me being a father is to make sure I give Peyton, my daughter, everything that she has and everything I didn't have. And so my brother and I have different fathers, and he reached out to his dad and he has communication with his dad and his siblings, but I never did. And I wasn't ready. And so I heard a message at church. I want to say it was during Easter, if I'm not mistaken, and it's talk about no more nails. And, the pastor asked, how long will you choose to stay wounded? When is it enough? Like, it's enough. Like, time to finally, whatever it is, make sure it's time to be free from it. And so I told my wife that morning, I said, babe, I think I'm going to have to forgive my dad. And I reached out to my aunt. I have two aunts on my father's side that I'm fairly close with. And so I reached out to them like, hey, do you have Edgar's number? And so I went around trying to get it. I went home to Ohio, which is where I was born, a couple Thanksgivings ago. And it was Thanksgiving, and I walked in, and there was a man standing in the middle of the room. And you would think it was like a Lifetime movie. Like, I can't make this up. It literally was, I walked in the room. Somebody said, oh my God, there's Ryan. And there was a man standing in the middle of the room, and someone came to me and said, do you know who that is? And I said to them, I think I just figured it out. So that was my first encounter with my father since I was a kid. And then at the end of that, each sibling had to come up and give like words. And so I got the mic and I said to the room, this is kind of crazy for me because I haven't seen this man in 25 years. And I don't think people knew that. And I saw him that day and that was it. I still didn't reach out or do anything. And then most recently I went home and I was home for my uncle's wedding. And I said, listen, can you get my dad and meet me for lunch? And don't tell him. And it was so crazy. Again, like a movie. I pulled up and he was walking with my aunt and they were in front of me. And he stayed outside to smoke a cigarette and she went inside. And I walked up and he started complimenting my shoes. And I was like, all right, thanks, man. And we just started, he's like, I'm a chef. So you're in the fashion. I could tell I'm a chef. So I do like fashion with food. And in that moment, I realized he still didn't know who I was.
How did that make you feel?
I kind of expected it. And I knew, but I wasn't there for him. I was there for me. And not even just for me. I was there for Peyton. I was there for my wife. I was there for my family, because it's hard to be a man and not be raised by a man to a degree.
Right.
So there's some things that are missing, but I was the bigger person. And I asked him after about 5 minutes of just general conversation, do you know who I am? And he said, you look familiar. I can see your eyes. I can tell. And I said words I've never said in my entire life. I'm your son.
Wow, Ryan. I'm looking at page 53 in your book that I would ask. I'm going to put this on the Total Woman page where you can order Fashion and Fatherhood. I think every father, every mother, daughter, this book can be read by anyone. But on page 53, he has some more fatherhood tips. And I'm looking at the one where it says, dads, it's your job to provide. And when you wrote that, what did you mean?
Everything. So for men, a lot of times our providing is going out working, like going to hunt, getting the food, bringing it home, roar. Yeah, I'm dad. That's what I do. But you have to provide other things. And a lot of times as men, we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be, we think it's soft sometimes, right? So we're not so lovey-dovey, but your wife needs that. Your child needs that. There are things that your daughter doesn't, or your kid doesn't understand. She's 2. She doesn't know.
Right.
But you still got to make sure you're providing for her, whether it be food or safety or shelter, or letting her know. I went outside the other day, just briefly, like ran outside to the car, ran back. I was probably gone 10 seconds. And when I came back, Peyton was crying profusely. Mm-hmm. And I just held her and I said, Daddy's never going to leave you. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry. Daddy's never going to leave. I said, do you understand what I'm saying? And she said, yes. I said, I'm never going anywhere.
And Ryan, I'm looking at one before we wrap this up. You said, hug your children. I can imagine that because you didn't have a father's love, but I remember you were a very loving young person. You had the biggest smile. Was there a little boy on the inside of you still craving something?
I think there's always a lacking. When you're missing something, there's some kind of lacking, and a lot of times you're trying to overcompensate.
Right.
With something else.
Right.
So maybe it's work. Maybe it's
that smile you got. You ain't overcompensating with that. It's always been there. He's the same Ryan. I am going to post pictures on my Total Woman page of this handsome young man. I am so very proud of him and the things that he has accomplished and the things that he's doing as far as being a father and the father to this sweet little Peyton, Baroness. I like that name. But Ryan, what is your next book? I can see it.
Oh,
what
gosh.
is it?
Man, listen. So people have been asking me that since this one released. And I've learned to just let God lead me. And I was going through a very rough patch moving back to Charlotte after being gone away for 3 years. I spent a couple years in Washington, D.C. I did a year in Jersey. Then I moved back to Charlotte about a year ago. And so the first 6 to 8 months were pretty bad for us, honestly. And so I started writing, journaling. And honestly, Ms. G, that's how I got through high school. Yeah. At the end, when I was going through that rough patch that we spoke about earlier.
Yes.
I started journaling. I started writing. And so I don't know if that's going to be a part of the next book because some of those things are super personal. But I know there's something else coming, and I don't know what it was. I knew I would always write a book. In my mind, I thought it'd be about 2009, which was a pretty rough year for me. But God gave me this book, and so whatever the next one is, He's going to have to give me that one too. So I don't know.
And you know what? Just a shout out to your mom too, because a lot of times back in the day, I was like the mother to so many children, including mine. And you were also friends with my daughters, Alicia and Deetra. But there are times when you will find moms that really don't like other women connecting with their sons.
Yeah.
But your mother had no problem with the love that we had for you, Ryan. And I'm so thankful to her, Miss Cheryl. I was so thankful.
Hi, Mom.
But I want you to take us out with some advice to fathers, really not to fathers. Sometimes you need to give advice to mothers, the ones that are single mothers and raising sons on their own.
I had, on the way here, and I don't believe God makes mistakes. I don't believe in coincidence or happenstance. So I had a woman, a lady who is a single mother of 2 teenage boys. And she wrote a lot, but the biggest thing she wrote was, I've been very angry at God for a long time now, but seeing snippets of him working in your life reminds me that everyone has a purpose. Everyone has the power to turn their struggle into a powerful story.
Right.
We have goals and dreams. The only thing that stands in our way is ourselves and the doubt that we sometimes allow to get us down. Keep doing what you're doing, and people are being inspired by your story. And so I think that's the biggest thing, not just for mothers or fathers, that if you're in your lane doing what you should be doing,
Yes.
people will notice that. And more so, God will align. I'm in a season of alignment right now. So things are happening for me now that we talked about when I was 16 and 19. And I think it's because I know it's because I've aligned properly, with God. So for anybody that's out there listening to this podcast, just make sure that you are aligning with whatever you believe in, the universe or God, and allow him to lead you. And it may sound cliche, but I promise you, the moment I tried to when I took the reins off myself and I tried to stop doing it myself is the moment that God stepped in and he's leading my path and directing me. So the advice I have for you is get close to something that gives you that inspiration, whether it's reading or meditating or yoga, and just find that you talk about the inner person, right?
Yes.
Let that inner person free. And mental freedom is a word. It's actually a prayer that one of my fraternity brothers stated. I don't even know if he knew what he was saying, but he closed the prayer talking about thanking God for mental freedom. Yes. And that is so important, to be free in your mind. And if you free your mind up, you will realize that everything else will fall into place. And you can speak those things that be not as though they were, as the word says, or you can really, command the universe to line up with what you say.
Yes.
And you really need to believe in yourself and believe in your giftings and use the giftings of your hands to make things the way you need them. And I believe there's somebody waiting on whoever's listening to this podcast out there to get in alignment so they can be free. So once you free up your mind, then you can free up somebody else just by operating your giftings.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us today on the Total Woman Show. This is the month of August, and we decided to have writers, poets, authors, bloggers, songwriters, and this one has really been a very special one. I remember, and Ryan might have been 15, 16. Mm-hmm. Well, he better have been more than 15.
I think 16.
Because he was driving my car, but that don't mean anything, because as I was saying, that another young man that was, as a part of our family, I was talking one Sunday when he was installed as pastor, Idris. And I was telling the congregation, like when the guys would have something on their mind, or if I had to pick them up and take them somewhere, I'd make them drive, and I would listen as they drove. And I remember Ryan driving us to his house, and I'm sure he didn't have license, so y'all know he was doing some illegal stuff back there. But he began to ask me a lot of questions, and that's why I am so touched and honored today to see years later, this young man, he wanted to talk about marriage and what it meant, and love, and so many other things. And God has allowed all of that to come to fruition in his life as the husband and the father, and even as the son. So Ryan, thank you again for joining us today on the Total Woman Show. Join us each Thursday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on WDRBmedia.com, the voice of the community, for double the information and inspiration. Check out our Facebook page for Total Woman, where we will post a broadcast if you miss it. Email me at totalwoman63@gmail.com if you have comments or questions. If you would like to be a sponsor of this broadcast, send me and email or inbox me on the Total Woman Facebook page. Make sure you have given your best today, because your best is all that you owe. God bless you.